coast of Cochin, which has been inhabited by Christian residents for a number of years now. Now, the question is, in both of these instances, whether it is in Karnataka or in Kerala, it sheds a light on the oversized influence of the WAQF board when it comes to land dealings vis-a-vis private individuals. The point is, should a private body, remember the WAQF is not a government-oriented body or a government-authorized body, it's a private body of individuals, have this kind of oversized control over land holdings? Now, according to some estimates, the WAQF controls somewhere over 1 lakh crores worth of property across the length and breadth of this country. The question is, should the board of private individuals have this kind of power? Should, if they come into contact or conflict with land that is being held by private individuals, be deemed by courts of law, as opposed to having this almost arbitrary sort of diktat that it cannot be contested in a court of law? And most importantly, should the government step in now to try and rein in the powers of this oversized individuals, this oversized WAQF board entities? But first, the story of what happened both in Karnataka and in Kerala.
विधान सौदा भी अपना है, अभी हम क्लेम नहीं कर रहा है, आने वाले दिन में हम क्लेम करेंगे। ऐसा बोलने का ताकत हिम्मत तो कहाँ से मिला? वो बिल के वजह से मिला।
What issue also yes, that's also all bogus issues, all bogus issues.
अब वो लगातार इस बात की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि आप इसकी डेट बढ़ाई जाए या इसका एक्सटेंशन हो।
बहुत सारे चीज़ में कंपैरेटिव स्टडीज़ करने की ज़रूरत है, स्टेक होल्डर से बात करने की ज़रूरत हो, तो वो प्रॉपरली स्टडी करें, या ऐसा नहीं कि एक बिल लेके हैं कल जुडिशरी में जो है इसको स्टक डाउन कर दें।
All right, so is this patronage? Is that patronage leading to some kind of usurping of land? Rohan Gupta, spokesperson of the BJP, joining us. Vivek Bansal, leader of the Congress. Ishkaran Singh Mandari, advocate with the Supreme Court, will also be joining us. Let me start with you, Rohan Gupta. So the contention by the Congress, the other opposition parties is you're just making this a communal issue, saying that, this is a Hindu-Muslim thing. Fact of the matter is, WAQF board has existed in this country for the last 50 years. And every time there is a contentious dispute between WAQF and private individuals, those private individuals are well within their right to move court of law to contest the claims by the WAQF board. You are now bringing this up after 50 long years, after the formation of WAQF boards in this country, because you want to polarize the narrative. How would you respond to that, Rohan?
Zakka, how it is communal? If anybody's private property, as you remember in Bangalore, somebody's property which he owned from 1944, someday it is receives WAQF board notice that the WAQF board has right on this, and then he has to prove. Is it correct for any democracy? It is not. Why? If there are any rules in the democracy which are not correct, you are moving ahead with time and you are changing those rules, why it is taken from communal mindset? This is all about the mindset. This is the height of Muslim appeasement, where anything which is done against anybody is taken as appeasement. Why? Why you cannot see it from open mind that, okay, we have to stop misuse of certain law. If certain body is given abundant power after democracy, we have grown now as a country. And if there are corrections are required, new resolutions are required, why the people are against that? How it is communal? Is it against Muslims? And even after being WAQF board having 9 lakh acres of land, you tell me how many Muslims are getting benefited out of that? No one. So if the government is ready to ensure that these laws are changed, to ensure that people who require the benefit are given benefit, why these people are making it communal issue? Because the minority, the community, even Muslims have subcaste. They are not getting benefited out of current WAQF board. Are they above the collector? Are they above the law of land? No. If there are certain reforms which are required as the time grows. It should not be seen from communal angle.
Okay.
This is the height of appeasement politics of opposition.
Okay, Vivek Bansal, the problem is that the power granted to the Waqf boards under sections 40 of the Waqf Act, which basically allows the Waqf board to declare any property as held by the Waqf, therefore prone to litigation by the private individuals who may have been holding that land for generations. This issue, section 40 of the Waqf Act, has been misused in the past, and critics argue what this allows is the enabling of arbitrary claims of land. It creates conflict and legal disputes with stakeholders who have controlled this land for a number of years. If somebody wants to bring in a reform to amend section 40 of the Waqf Act, which is arbitrary, which is powers that are beyond reasonable means to a non-elected, non-democratic entity, then what is wrong with that?
Well, let me just tell you, whatever you are saying, the section 40, I had represented a leaguer in the Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council, and in a leaguer there is lot of Waqf properties there. I can tell you with my personal knowledge, nothing in this misuse of Article 40 in Waqf Act has not taken place, and not at all taken place. On the contrary, Waqf keeps on fighting wherever it may be, partially being misused, or they try to over-exercise their authority and all, but they are not able to do anything. They are not able to rest that property.
Mr.
So this is all
Bansal, let
humbug.
me point to you the example of what happened in Karnataka recently, which is not a BJP-ruled state.
You see,
No,
India is such a diverse country.
it's a Congress-ruled
Let
state.
me just
41 individuals, 41 farmers in Bijapur Taluk, in Bijapur district, in a particular taluk in Bijapur district in northern Karnataka, 41 farmers suddenly found themselves being issued notices by the state government's revenue department saying that this land is being claimed by a Waqf board. It became a huge issue. The media played it up. Everyone talked about it. Eventually, the government had to roll back on the claims of the Waqf board. This has happened in a Congress-ruled state, not in a BJP-ruled state.
No. That may have, India is such a huge country and such a diverse country. Waqf Act may be, it may be varying from state to state. I am not aware of that. But as far as misuse of
The
Waqf
act is the same, all India. There's no change in act from state to state.
Okay.
The act is the same.
It may be. That's why I'm saying I'm completely amazed and in fact zapped by this information that this act is being misused by Waqf, and arbitrarily they are able to wrest control over any individual's property. So at least in Aligarh there are no such examples.
Mr. Bansal, I am asking you a simple question. Can you cite an example of a Sikh board or a Christian board or a Buddhist board or even a Hindu board which has this kind of oversized power, that they can suddenly say, okay, this land is ours, and thereafter, the state is then forced to send notices to people who may have held that land for generations? Any other religion that you can think of?
No. You see, it's not a question of any other religion or any other religious board. We had been having this Waqf Act for years together, and as whatever the policy of that point of time, when the forefathers had enacted this constitution, and whatever the consensus must have emerged as a consequence of the deliberations, this was enacted. So,
Mr. Bansal, one second, Mr. Bansal, see, you have to have a certain rationale for this argument. If it is about protection of minority rights, then you should cite the examples of such acts in other religions as well, other minority religions as well. But you can't. There is no such provision in any other minority religion. It's only for Muslims. It's only for the Waqf board. And it is arbitrary powers. That's the problem.
Arbitrary powers, you see, I do not know this ruckus has been that about arbitrary powers. I'm completely, I'm completely oblivious of this, except for the fact now
I gave you the example of what happened in Karnataka. There is examples of what is happening in Himachal Pradesh. There are examples of what's happening in Uttar Pradesh. Numerous examples across the country where Waqf is coming out and claiming property which has been held for generations by non-Muslims and saying that this is our property. But Ishkaran, let's talk about the legality of this. No, one second, Mr. Bansal, one second, please. Let me go to Ishkaran. As per certain estimates, 7% of all immovable property across India is claimed by WAQF. Now, the problem is that once the WAQF claims this under Section 40 of the WAQF Act, which allows them to declare any property anywhere in India as WAQF property, then that leads to arbitrary claims over the land concerned. It creates conflicts, it creates legal disputes, and frankly, this whole business of discrimination, like you cannot cite a similar example from any other religion, Hindu, Christian, Sikh, Buddhist, whatever.
Zakka, you have put out the absolute correct position of law. It is a power unique to the WAQF board, not available to any other religion, including minority religions. A Christian cannot have a board like this which can declare a property as his own and then get the state machinery into action to get possession of that property. Nor can a Sikh, nor can a Jain, nor can a Buddhist. Nobody else can do that. This is unique to it. And this law has to go, but one other point which is very interesting, in spite of having the largest probably private in a sense land holding, non-government land holding, still there is a demand for Muslim reservation because in a sense it has not benefited the poor Muslim also, though that is not the ground for it to go. The grounds are manifold. Some of the grounds why it should go is, you are giving example of Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or Himachal. Delhi itself, when Britishers were building it as a capital, they acquired a lot of properties, paid compensation, mutated the properties, constructed buildings on them, and it is all documented because compensation was given. Then later on, Congress government in 84 says, no, we will give this land in the heart of Delhi, Lutyens Delhi, to the WAQF board. The people went to court, the court stayed that order. Then again, before going in 2014, they tried to do that, and that matter is pending. So places where compensation has been paid, vital assets of the government of India, heart of Delhi, are being claimed under this WAQF Act. And it is a unique code because not only do you claim, you get the state to pay for the survey. The ordinary law is, if you believe it's your property, you go to court, you show documents, you show how you are entitled to it, you get an order from the court, and then you try to get it executed. Here it is completely the reverse. The board, consisting of Muslims, can decide that this is our property, issue notice, and in law, the minute you issue that notice, the person will not be able to sell it, will not be able to create a third party interest in it. That is what will happen day one. Day one, you can own a property for 100 years, but once this is issued, it is a property under litigation. Without any court order, just by this WAQF board.
Let me explain this to our viewers, what Ishkaran is saying, by giving you an example. Now, there's a place called Munambam in Kerala. For the last few months, this has become a disputed property between the WAQF board in Kerala and fisher folk community who've been living there for 3, 4, 5 generations. It's about 400 acres of land. It's off the coast of Cochin. Munambam, suddenly this whole issue has flared up because the WAQF board has come out and said that this land is originally belonging to them. Now, there are 600 families, a large number of them are Christian, some of them are Hindu, 600 families who've been living in Munambam Island for a number of generations, 2, 3, 4 generations altogether. And suddenly in the last few weeks, last few months, the WAQF board has come out and claimed that land. Now my point is, no other community has this kind of almost extra judicial rights where they can come out and claim any land as WAQF land. No other community has this. Number two, if the people who are residing there for generations upon generations have, documents and papers and land documents to prove that that land belongs to them, then how is it that you have this almost extrajudicial authority or power in a body that's vested to come out and say that, look, this is within our remit and that this now needs to be litigated? Who bears the cost of that litigation? Ultimately, it boils down to the people who've held this land for generations together. So, the problem, Ishkaran, is this is a very imbalanced law. The WAQF can claim any property which is yours or mine or 600 families who've been living in this Munambam Island. Now, the onus is upon you or me or those families to prove that we have the documents, the original land deed and sale deed and so on for generations to prove that this is our land.
Yes. Zakka, it is worse than an extrajudicial body. It is in effect a state within a state with all the powers of a state, because the officers here have the power of a civil court. Then section 85 bars the jurisdiction of civil court. As I was saying, the minute they claim the property is there, then the owner, generational owner, has to run from pillar to post. If he has some need, he cannot sell that property, because it has in a sense become a disputed property in which a legal body, because it's an act, has said that it belongs to them. That property effectively cannot be sold. That could take 20, 30 years. Even if you have the money to fight the case, go to tribunal, go to high court, win the case. How many people in India have the power to fight such orders against such bodies with the resources needed to fight it? And last point, I will just finish. The ordinary laws Zakka against it, whether you are a mandir, you are a church, you are anything, you're a gurdwara, if you believe a land is yours, even a religious institution, you have to go and prove your case in a court of law. Here it is a body which says there is a concept of waqf by user. So if 20 years somebody is not looking at a property, you could tomorrow come and say waqf by user and it is my property. That is why Mr. Owaisi had to say that out of 1,50,000 acres or some big number, 70-80% is waqf by user. Waqf by user means what? That because I am using it and you are not paying attention and I don't even know whether I am using it or not, I can claim property. This code has to go out, I believe, lock, stock and barrel, but at the very least it needs significant amendments to it to come in par with the other laws of India.
The other issue is that despite owning substantial land assets, Rohan Gupta, across the length and breadth of this country, in fact, according to some estimates, the Waqf boards across the country from Kashmir to Kanyakumari own property worth 1.2 lakh crores. The fact that they have managed to generate a fraction out of this land, only a fraction of revenue or potential revenue out of this land, just about 150, 160 crores or so, also beggars the question, why should all this land worth potentially 1.2 lakh crore rupees, be held by these Waqf boards when only 100 crores or so is being generated as revenue? Now, point is, everybody in India knows that India, particularly in the urban and semi-urban parts of this country, is resource starved, it is land starved, and there is a premium for land in this country. 1.2 lakh crores worth of land is in this land bank called the Waqf board, but they are only generating 100 crores of revenue. That's not an optimum use of this land.
Absolutely. Zakka, see, that is the point here. You know, nobody is asking logical or relevant question. Because something is happening wrong for so many years, it should continue. No. Whenever you ask logical questions, Zakka, I've attended many debates on that. They always take it to emotional issue. हमारी मस्जिद ले रहा है, वो खत्म कर देंगे. अरे, this is amendment thing which is direct attack on any private property belonging to any caste. See, tomorrow it is not necessary that land will belong only to Hindu. It can be even to a Muslim who is a poor Muslim. उसकी land पे भी हो सकता है. आप उसको धर्म के एंगल से क्यों देख रहे हैं? You cannot bring politics in all reforms. That is the problem with opposition parties. This is Waqf Board Amendment Bill, where something which is wrong, something which is above Constitution needs to be brought down inside the Constitution. Don't you feel Waqf Board current powers are above our Constitution? Does our Constitution allow extraordinary power to anybody in this country? No. Once they are talking about the Constitution, the opposition parties, and if they are opposing
the Joint Parliamentary Committee, which has been formed to look into this, of course, is going into the merits of this matter. I believe they had one meeting, the last meeting that they had was yesterday, where the opposition members have said extend the tenure of the Joint Parliamentary Committee. The BJP members have said, why? What's the need for extending? We are ready with the report. Let's submit the report and let the Parliament take up this bill in the winter session. Winter session starts from Monday. Now, my point, Mr. Bansal, is if the Waqf Amendment Bill restricts the ability of Waqf boards to claim all and sundry property, restricts the ability of Waqf boards to get individual litigants to approach the court for disputes over properties, the claims made by the Waqf boards regarding land ownership, making it outdated, making it erroneous, the amendments that have been proposed also bring into effect non-Muslims into Waqf boards. If all of these have been proposed, And if BJP members are saying that the JPC is ready to submit its report before the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, and then eventually the two houses have to take a call on passing this bill, why should that be blocked, Mr. Bansal? Why should this extrajudicial authority decide which land is theirs and which land is somebody else's, and the onus is on that other person to go to court and prove his or her credentials to that land?
Mr. Jacob, it's not a question of blocking a particular, bill or basically the reservations which have been in the meetings which have been brought out by the opposition. There are always two sides of a coin. So they too have brought out certain reservations, certain apprehensions of the minority communities. So why these are not being addressed? Why they are being brushed aside? Or why the chairman of the Joint Parliamentary Committee is acting in a very.
If I can outline for the benefit of our viewers, Section 85 of the WAQF Act, as per that, the decisions by WAQF tribunals are final, cannot be contested in higher courts. Section 40, I've just mentioned, it places the burden of proof on the landowners to prove that they are the original inheritors of whatever land is contested by the WAQF board. There was a 2013 amendment when the UPA 2 was in power, which scrapped the Supreme Court ruling, which removed a one-year limit. If there was any, Muslim body, WAQF board coming in claiming a piece of land which was held by somebody else, then there was a ruling, a long-standing Supreme Court ruling, which said within 1 year, one second, hear me out, please hear me out. There was a Supreme Court ruling which said within 1 year, the WAQF board or the Muslim who was claiming that land as WAQF has to bring proof within 1 year to prove that this is WAQF land. That was taken away by UPA 2 in a 2013 amendment which was passed in both houses of the parliament. Section 6 of the WAQF Act also said that the aggrieved parties have only 1 year to appeal the claims on the land. Within 1 year, you have to settle this. Section 3 allows the WAQF boards to claim land if they believe, and this is an overriding sort of section of the WAQF Act, allows the WAQF boards to claim any land if they believe that it belongs to a Muslim without having to produce the burden of proof in a court of law. How is that fair, Mr. Bansal?
You see, I'm not going into the merits that you are talking about these arbitrary, or the fact that WAQF may just try to own any property. That's not a question. That may be right, but anybody who is on a WAQF land must be having the requisite papers which entitles him to own that land, possess that land.
You see,
any land for that matter.
Ishkaran, there are two disparities that are stark here. One, no other religion has this oversized influence, oversized authority to claim any land as their land. And two, like I said, I can't think of any other section, you're a lawyer so you know better, any other section which places the burden of proof on the person who is the original, landowner. Or in this case, I mean, for want of a better phrase in criminal phraseology, the burden of the proof is placed on the accused, not on the prosecution.
Absolutely. Zakka, criminal laws are separate, so nowadays we have some anomalies in criminal law, but in property law, the burden cannot be on somebody who is seeking possession without documents, but something more important. We just heard the Congress spokesperson saying, or so Congress representative saying, that certain reservations, certain problems, if I am a dacoit and I have property with me and police comes to take property from me, the dacoit might have certain reservations. Please spell out A, B, C reservation, and then Zakka, as you're asking whether it is fair or not, you can see, for example, I'll just two examples. Should you not be an owner before you dedicate a property to WAQF? You cannot create a title better than a title you have. What is this concept of WAQF by user? You have to be an owner before you create a WAQF. Here we are having concepts like, if there is a public park and you tomorrow say we were using it, nobody objected to it, can it become a WAQF property? And can you then claim it as my property, not the government's property, not the community's property? Can you claim that? So WAQF by user has to go. Or you take, why should the state pay for it? Why should the survey be done at the cost of the state? It is for your purpose, you spend it like any other institution, even religious institution in this country does. Or if you are coming to the very basics, how are you barring the jurisdiction of civil courts in this? And Zakka, the reality of India is we still struggle with access to justice. The minute Waqf Board order comes, do you think a person living in a village has the access to justice, the resources, the money to contest it? Half the times they let go of the property. That is the reality of this country, and that is why this law needs to go. Come in line with every other law of this country. It was a naked appeasement bid.
If you look at what happened in Karnataka, 41 farmers, these are poor farmers, albeit they held on to this land holdings for a number of generations. The reason why the government piped down and the Waqf Board piped down is because it came to the media, and the media made an issue of it and went to town about it. That's why the government had to roll back the notices sent to those 41 farmers. Now, God knows how many other such cases there are. In Munambam, for example, in Kerala, 600 Hindu and Christian families have been living in this island for generations. And suddenly in 2024, the Waqf Board comes and says, oh, this land, by the way, happens to be ours. And the onus is not on the Waqf Board. The onus to prove that the land belongs to them is on these families that have been residing there for generations. Now, that is a completely bizarre situation. It, turns the law on its head, if I might use that phrase. But we'll leave it at that. Rohan Gupta, Ishkaran Mandari, and Mr. Bansal, thank you for joining us. I'm going to shift focus now from the Waqf story, which of course affects everyone across this country, whether you're in Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, wherever you are. This is something that will possibly be taken up in the winter session of Parliament. But I want to shift focus now to Verdict Day, which is tomorrow, both for Maharashtra and for Jharkhand. Maharashtra, of course, is the biggest state. I mean, it's 288 seats. It's the second biggest state in terms of Lok Sabha MPs after Uttar Pradesh. Huge stakes, both for the BJP, the ruling party, and of course for the Congress, the main opposition. But essentially the two alliances, Mahayuti, which is the BJP, the Shinde Sena, and the NCP Ajit Pawar. On the other hand, you have the Mahavikas Aghadi, which is the Congress, the Shiv Sena UBT, and of course Sharad Pawar's NCP. Pollsters have given an edge to the NDA. Some of them have given a substantial lead to the NDA. Some of them a marginal lead to the NDA. But out of 7 polls, last time I checked, 6 of them are saying that it will be the NDA or the Mahayuti that will come back to power. Only one suggesting that the Mahavikas Aghadi will come back. Now, the Mahavikas Aghadi, of course, is confident that they will be able to prove all the exit poll projections wrong. Remember, exit polls have not exactly covered themselves in glory. Just recently, a few months ago, Haryana, just last month, Haryana, everyone predicted there will be a romping Congress victory. That's not how it turned out. So, some of the factors, there are 3 or 4 things that you need to watch out for. Number 1, the voter turnout. It is substantially higher than what we've seen in previous elections. Last election was 61%, this election is 66%. So what explains that 5% increase? It's a massive jump. Is it woman voter turnout because of Ladki Behan, which is this 1,500 rupees being paid by the state government to women's accounts at the end of the month? Was that the game changer? There is anecdotal, not evidence, but anecdotal sort of stories from our reporters, from our stringers, that women have turned out in large numbers, particularly in rural areas. Have they voted and given that extra edge, that extra 5% to the Mahayuti? And most importantly, and this is a very, very fascinating, intriguing factor, the constituencies where one has seen highest voter turnout, over 75%, closer to 75%, over 70%, closer to 75%, are not traditionally what you would associate with Maharashtra. It's not in Vidarbha, it's not in Marathwada, it's in western Maharashtra, the sugar belt, the rich part of Maharashtra, which is really a Pawar versus Pawar fight. Kolhapur district, for example, has seen the highest voter turnout in the state of Maharashtra. I decode what explains that. All right, the big question is, of course, the voter turnout. Remember, it's 66%, which is 5% more than what we saw in 2019. Let's take a look at the seats that are above 70%. That's 4% or more than what the state average is. The constituencies that are more than 70%, you can see a whole bunch here in Vidarbha, which is important. These are agrarian seats. These are seats that have been distressed by farmer anger, if you will, whether it's on soybean crop, whether it's on cotton crop. So this is the bunch of seats here in the agrarian distress belt in Vidarbha. Then you have this whole bunch of seats in Marathwada, which are again hugely important because of the agitation around Manoj Jarangi Patil, the Maratha reservation agitation that's happening in places like Latur, Beed, Nanded, etc. But what is interesting is this time around, if you focus on this area, which is Western Maharashtra, which has always been sort of the backyard, the gud of Sharad Pawar, the sugarcane belt, this belt is suddenly seeing a huge increase in voter turnout. Kolhapur, for example, here is Kolhapur, which is an urban, very rich, sort of middle class constituencies, but they are suddenly seeing a spike. Kolhapur has the biggest turnout across the state of Maharashtra. Kolhapur, Satara, Sangli, the Western Maharashtra belt, which is a bit odd. Now, the only plausible explanation is that in Western Maharashtra, it's a fight for identity. Both Sharad Pawar and Ajit Pawar are fighting for who will control the legacy of the NCP. And that's why voters from both sides of the aisle, from the Sharad Pawar faction and from the Ajit Pawar faction, have turned up in large numbers. That's why in an odd sort of development, you have in Western Maharashtra a large number of people turning up. Now, the other interesting factor, of course, is women voters. Women voters, because Ladli Behna, which is, or Ladki Behna, which is the Maharashtra Mukhyamantri Yojana, where 1,500 rupees is paid to women. 5 installments have been meted out, 7,500 rupees. If you look at this belt, which is the Konkan belt, Raigad, Sindhudurg, the outskirts of Mumbai, sort of the coastal belt of Western Maharashtra, that entire belt is, of course, important as far as Ladki Behna is concerned. This has always been a Shiv Sena belt. Now, whether or not paying 1,500 rupees to women will actually flip them from Shiv Sena to Shinde Sena, that is going to be interesting. The other area where you've seen an impact of Ladki Behna, and we go back to the more women voters, is in Vidarbha. Again, you've seen large number of women, anecdotally speaking, large number of women coming out in areas around Vidarbha, Akola, Gadchiroli, all of these places where you can see the difference. 24 seats to the BJP last time, 15 seats to the Congress, a difference of almost 8% between the two major formations. And again, you're seeing this in the Vidarbha region where more women are turning out than men. But the most critical factor, and I think this really explains the voter turnout versus where this voter turnout is actually turning out. If you look at the NCP versus NCP Sharad Pawar fights, interestingly in Maharashtra this time, it's not in Vidarbha, it's not in Marathwada, it's actually in Western Maharashtra where you're seeing the highest voter turnout. So there are 38 constituencies where it's NCP Sharad Pawar versus NCP Ajit Pawar, of which 18 constituencies, more than half of it, is actually seeing the highest voter turnout. So whether it is Baramati, where Ajit Pawar is taking on Yogendra Pawar, whether it is the neighboring constituency of Indrapur, whether it is Phaltan, whether it is the constituency of Madha, all of these places in Western Maharashtra, you are seeing, because it's NCP versus NCP, a higher voter turnout. Voter turnout 5% more than the state average. So 18 out of the 38 seats where NCP Sharad Pawar and NCP Ajit Pawar are fighting it out, you are seeing higher voter turnout. The other big factor, and this is important to remember because if you look at where the ministers are contesting, there are about 30 odd ministers. We've managed to block 28 out of 288. That's 10% of the strength of the assembly. BJP won 19, Congress won 9 last time around. There are some seats in Western Maharashtra, a couple of seats in Mumbai, a lot of seats in Northern Maharashtra here, and again, a few seats here in Vidarbha. A large number of these seats were won by NCP, the United NCP last time around. If you look at the BJP's sort of split, there were 10 seats to the BJP, 9 seats to the Shiv Sena. Again, a mix of Konkan, Western Maharashtra, Vidarbha, etc. Now, the point is that whether this will actually play out the way the BJP and the Shinde Sena want. If they really want to make a difference, they have to make a difference in these seats, these 28 seats, where ministers are contesting, where we have seen significantly higher voter turnout. Whether that is anti-incumbency, whether that is the turnout of ministers to establish the legacy of the real Sena, that we'll know only on Saturday morning when the counting happens.
Putin lowers Russia's nuclear trigger. Now, NATO countries issue urgent war prep pamphlet while Sweden and Norway warn residents to shelter. Now, Ukrainian President Zelensky condemned Russia's use of intercontinental ballistic missiles, calling the attack undignified and highlighting the devastating toll on civilian infrastructure. Now, in a shocking move, Russia fires its first intercontinental ballistic missile at Ukraine, leaving 2 wounded and damaging key facilities. Now, this comes as Russia claims to have downed British missile rockets and drones, now sparking fresh chaos in Europe. Now, the stakes have never been this high.
Путін використовує Україну як полігон. Очевидно, що Путін боїться, коли поруч з ним просто є нормальне життя, коли люди просто мають гідність, коли країна просто хоче бути і має право бути незалежною. Путін робить все, що завгодно, тільки б не дати сусіду вирватись з його рук. І я дякую всім українцям, усім українкам, які захищають Україну від цього зла стійко, хоробро, міцно, гідно. Це одне з головних слів про Україну – гідність. І це слово, яке, мабуть, вже ніколи не скажуть про Росію. Сьогодні я підпишу указ, яким введено в силу рішення РНБО саме про гідність, про повагу до справжніх героїв, героїв України, до усіх наших гідних людей і про чесне ставлення до тих, хто обрав іншу сторону, обрав Росію і підлість. В першому списку таких осіб 34 прізвища. Слава Україні!
Так, с нами ли,
Да,
с нами
спасибо
ли
большое,
портал
Марина Замечательно.
News.ru? Да. Алло. Да, у меня брифинг. Да, хорошо, спасибо. С нами ли News?
All right, and Russia fired a hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile at Ukrainian city of Dnipro on Thursday in response to the US and UK, allowing Kyiv to strike Russian territory with advanced Western weapons in further escalation of 33-month-old war. All right, so this is what we are getting to know, that first, of course, the intermediate ballistic missile was used by Russia, and now we are getting to know that Russia fired a hypersonic intermediate range ballistic missile at Ukrainian city of Dnipro on Thursday in response to the US and UK, allowing Kyiv to strike Russian territory, which happened, of course, earlier this week. And Russia has, of course, retaliated with the intermediate ballistic missiles are concerned. Now, moving on to the statement, of course, that is coming in from the Russian president at this point. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin responds to Ukraine's use of US arms with ballistic missile strike. Putin said, and I quote, "We have the right to use weapon against military targets of those who use weapons against US." Now, against us, I beg your pardon. The United States made a mistake by destroying the missile treaty in 2019, unquote. Let me now go back to my colleague Akansha Swaroop. Akansha, it seems that this is, of course, a major escalation as far as the intermediate ballistic missile is concerned, because this seems to be used first time, and this can actually lead to a nuclear war.
Absolutely, Sherin. And the UN too has, of course, said that Russia's use of intermediate range missile is extremely worrying. They've said that this is yet another concerning and worrying development. All of this is going in the wrong direction. This is the statement that has come in from UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric. So the overall global community is worried by this action. As you rightly highlighted, it is a great point of escalation. But let's not forget the fact that, during that surprise address, the Russian president has also highlighted that, after...
Welcome back. On November 21st, this past week, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that his military had conducted a test of hypersonic intermediate-range missiles identified as the Oreshnik during the attack on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Now, this missile is reportedly capable of reaching speeds up to 10 Mach, which is 10 times the speed of sound, approximately 12,000 kilometers per hour. It is designed to evade the current missile defense systems, making it particularly formidable in combat scenarios. The attack coincided with Ukraine's increased use of long-range weapons, long-range missiles essentially, supplied first by the United States and then by UK and France, prompting Russia to assert its military capabilities in response to these threats from NATO countries. Ukraine, in this past week, has used both the American-made Tacks, which are these long-range missiles, as well as the Franco-British Storm Shadows to attack deep inside Russia. Now, this is the first time that Ukraine has hit deep inside Russian territory with long-range missiles since this war began more than 2 years ago. The deployment of the hypersonic missiles like the Oreshnik signifies a shift from Russia's military strategy, hoping to demonstrate its technological advancements, while at the same time sending a clear signal to Western allies who are supporting Ukraine. This move is seen as an attempt to deter any further military assistance to Ukraine and to reinforce Russia's position in this conflict. Ukrainian officials have expressed concerns that their country is being used as a testing ground for Russian weaponry, indicating that there's going to be a troubling escalation in hostilities.
On November the 19th, 6 Attackams missiles manufactured in the US were used, and on the 21st, a combined attack using Storm Shadow manufactured in the UK and missiles manufactured in the US were used to attack missile targets in the Bryansk and Kursk regions of the Russian Federation.
Путін робить все, що завгодно, тільки б не дати сусіду вирватись з його рук. І я дякую всім українцям, усім українкам, які захищають Україну від цього зла стійко, хоробро, міцно, гідно. Це одне з головних слів про Україну – гідність. І це слово, яке, мабуть, вже ніколи не скажуть про Росію.
So, hypersonic missiles differ from conventional missiles primarily in their speed, in their maneuverability. Now, as far as speed is concerned, hypersonic missiles travel at speeds that are well above Mach 5, which is 5 times the speed of sound, roughly about over 6,000 kilometers an hour. Now, that makes them significantly faster than the traditional ballistic or cruise missiles, which makes it that much more difficult to trace them through conventional radars. Now, the trajectory, unlike conventional missiles which go from point A to point B, it follows a predictable parabolic path. Hypersonic weapons can maneuver mid-flight, and therefore intercepting these hypersonic missiles becomes that much more difficult. So instead of following a parabolic path from point A to point B, they go upwards, escape from the Earth's atmosphere, and then come back down. So therefore, the detection, because of the high speed and the ability to fly at lower altitudes, means that hypersonic missiles can evade any form of radar detection, which they're close to their targets. At the same time, it leaves very little time for any kind of defensive response. So the question then is this missile escalation, the hypersonic missiles that have been used by Russia. It can travel, like I said, at 5 times the speed of sound. It can maneuver mid-air, change course, change direction from the regular combat missiles or the intercontinental ballistic missiles, which go on a parabolic range. It is therefore difficult to detect and intercept these hypersonic missiles. Also, it can carry nuclear warheads. The one that was used to hit Ukraine did not carry a nuclear warhead. It was a conventional warhead. Now, if you compare that to intercontinental ballistic missiles, they travel at about, again, 5 times the speed of sound, more than 5 Mach. The maneuverability is high arching. They have a ballistic trajectory. It's a parabolic curve. They can cover intercontinental distances, which means more than 5,000 kilometers at any given point of time, and also can deliver nuclear warheads mounted on them. Now, India last week successfully tested its first ever long-range hypersonic missile, placing it amongst a select group of countries. That includes China, Russia, and the United States, which have achieved this hypersonic capability. The Defense Research and Development Organization, which is the DRDO, it conducted the flight trial from the APJ Abdul Kalam Island off the coast of Odisha. It happened on the 16th of November this year, according to a release put out by the Ministry of Defense. The hypersonic missile is designed to carry out various payloads, ranges from greater than 1,000 kilometers to over 5,000 kilometers for the armed forces of India. Now, the missile that's been used by Russia, it's called the Kinjal hypersonic missile. It's been developed by Russia. It's been a focal point in the last 2 years plus in hypersonic weaponry as well as in the trajectory of this war, particularly following the deployment of the Kinjals in Ukraine conflict. Now, here's how the Kinjal compares with other hypersonic missiles and the implications of using the Kinjal as far as this conflict is concerned. It's called the KH-47M2. It's often referred to as the Dagger. It's an air-launched ballistic missile, which means it has to be launched out of a fighter jet that's flying mid-air. It can reach speeds up to 10 Mach, which is 10 times the speed of sound, up to 12,000 kilometers per hour. It has a reported range of anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers. It can carry both conventional and nuclear warheads, and that makes it a very versatile option as far as military assaults are concerned. Now, the deployment of the hypersonic missile, particularly the Oreshnik, represents a notable escalation in Russia's military strategy when it comes to Ukraine. Remember, Russia has not used an intermediate-range ballistic missile so far in this conflict in the 2.5 years that it's been prolonging. President Vladimir Putin's announcement that these missiles can evade advanced Western air defense systems underscores the effectiveness of these missiles. The hypersonic missile strike on Dnipro was framed by Russia as a demonstration of its nuclear strike capability, even though that particular missile did not carry a nuclear warhead at the time that it struck Ukraine. Now, that was an act by Russia serving as a reminder of the willingness of the Russian Federation to escalate tensions and to potentially employ nuclear weapons if it is provoked, particularly in response to the increased Western support for Ukraine. Putin justified the attack as a retaliation for Ukraine's use of US as well as British and French long-range missiles against Russian targets on Russian mainland, signaling that further strikes could provoke more severe responses from Russia. All right, so let me now try and go across to somebody who has known a thing or two about the intercontinental ballistic missile as well as these intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which have now been hit into mainland Russia and, of course, a response from Russia into mainland Ukraine. The question is, who is provoking and what might be the response? Eyal Pinko is the cyber intelligence and military strategy expert. He's now joining us. Russia has confirmed that it hit with an IRBM, which is an intermediate-range ballistic missile, without any nuclear capability against Ukraine. What does that mean in the context of the overall Russia-Ukraine war?
Yeah, I think we need to look on that in the context because a week ago, the Biden administration allowed Ukraine to attack Russia with long-range missiles using the U.S. weapon system. So the Russian missile firing is coming after Ukraine did the same to Russia. So we are trying to be balanced and to look on the things, from both sides, not to be towards one side or another. But there is, I think, what we see in the recent weeks that Russia, will say that differently, Russia is starting to gain advance in this war towards Ukraine. And I think that Biden now allowed Ukraine to move forward in order to defend itself from the Russian aggressive that is coming and became more and more powerful, using soldiers, 10,000 soldiers from North Korea.
So, Mr. Pinko, the Americans have allowed the use of the long-range missiles, the ATACMS, to be used against mainland Russia. The Russians are responding with these hypersonic missiles. What is the trajectory forward that you believe? How is this war going to progress? Because at some point, somebody needs to come in and say, okay, it's time to de-escalate.
Yeah, I think the arena over there in the Eastern Europe is very hot. I can tell you that many countries as Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, and countries that are on the borderline with Ukraine and Russia are feel the stress and anxiety of what is going to happen there. I believe that the next 2 months are critical because everyone is looking forward for the Trump administration to come. And I think this is a very meaningful step, including the NATO and what will be the future of NATO. As you remember, Trump said many times that NATO is going to be dismantled. And I think that this situation now is very shaky. And looking forward, everyone wants to bring deterrence and to deter the other side, while nobody wants now to go to further escalation. So I think that this is a very, very fragile situation now, and it can be broken in hours, even though everyone wants to go into some kind of ceasefire agreement, I believe, and waiting for Trump.
So I'm curious to know what might that mean in terms of the future course of using hypersonic missiles. I just want you to explain to our viewers why Russia chose to use the intermediate range hypersonic missile as opposed to the intercontinental ballistic missile, which is what the speculation was all about over the last 24 hours, as it tries to send out a signal that, look, Ukraine, we can hit you wherever it hurts, but at the same time, we are not the one who escalated this to the highest level, which is the intercontinental ballistic missile, but we're escalating it to one level, one notch down, which is the IRBM. What might that mean?
Until now, Russia used most of the time, they used ballistic missiles, mainly for relatively short distances as 300 kilometers, as the Iskander and the other models. Putting now hypersonic cruise missiles, which is has a highly speed. It goes, they have missiles now going into a Mach 5, which is 5 times more than the speed of sound. This is a huge speed, which most of the anti-aerial system, the aerial defense systems, is not so capable in enabling to defense against this threat. So Russia, in alerting with, they have a new missiles. So Russia is alerting that they will not hesitate to use advanced, very accurate aerial defense penetrators, those missiles, in order to attack Kiev, which, until now they didn't want to attack Kiev, and they preserve this area in order to go into further escalation. This is a very large flag, which is being shown by the Russians, saying that they can go much faster, much higher, much accurate, with much more casualties that they can cause, and to be alert and not to go further on.
All right, Mr. Eyal Pinko, thank you very much for joining us and explaining to our viewers why this escalation by Russia is significant. Of course, the Russian response to what has been the Ukrainian use of long-range missiles, whether it's the Storm Shadows by France and Britain, or whether it is by the ATACMS, which is provided to it by the United States. But in terms of the hypersonic missiles, remember, the Russians have had the Kinjal for a number of years now. The difference between the hypersonic missile and a regular parabolic intercontinental ballistic missile is the trajectory. In the case of a hypersonic missile, it goes above the Earth's atmosphere, it goes above the stratosphere, and then comes down in what is a very sharp curve up and down. That makes it much more difficult to detect this using conventional radars. Whereas a regular parabolic missile goes from point A to point B, that does not escape the stratosphere. It goes in what is called a regular ellipse, a regular curve, and therefore traditional radars are enough to detect them. Of course, the intercontinental ballistic missiles traverse a much longer range, over 5,000 kilometers. When it comes to the intermediate range ballistic missiles or the hypersonic missiles, it's anywhere between 1,500 to 4,000 kilometers. So here's a comparison of how they stack up and why the Russians are using this hypersonic missile in a bid to try and send out a signal to Ukraine that it is not averse to using new and modern day technology in a bid to try and stop Ukraine in its tracks. In November of 1983, NATO undertook a military exercise named Able Archer 83. The exercise simulated a scenario in which NATO forces were responding to a hypothetical Soviet attack with nuclear weapons. It involved numerous military units, including troops, aircraft, and ships. It was intended to test NATO's command and control procedures in a simulated nuclear war. The Soviet Union, however, did not know that Able Archer 83 was a simulated exercise. They believed it was a cover for an actual attack on the Soviet Union. As a result, the Soviet military went on high alert. They got ready to launch a retaliatory nuclear strike. They deployed additional missile forces, putting their strategic bomber fleet on standby, and even mobilized their civilian air defense forces. The Soviet leadership was so convinced that they were under attack that they reportedly even considered launching a preemptive nuclear strike. Eventually, calmer heads prevailed and both sides backed down. This was just one incident in the 1980s when tensions between the two nations, that's America and the Soviet Union, had reached boiling point. Both sides had amassed a staggering number of nuclear weapons, and the risk of a nuclear war, even if by accident, was very high. The need was for a treaty to try and regulate the number of nuclear weapons either country had. So the negotiations for an arms control treaty started in the 80s. It went on for a number of years. It was long-winding, and eventually Moscow and Washington signed something called the START Treaty, or Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. It happened in July of 1991. Today, 30 years later, President Vladimir Putin, speaking to federal lawmakers last week in Russia, said that his country is going to pay increased attention to its nuclear forces. The plan is to deploy a much-delayed new intercontinental ballistic missile. He also wants to roll out hypersonic missiles, as well as adding nuclear submarines. A year since ordering the invasion of Ukraine, Putin has now signaled he's ready to rip up the very architecture of nuclear arms control. Right now, there is a moratorium on the big powers on testing any nuclear device. This, like I said, was signed and decreed as the START agreement. Putin last week announced that Russia is unilaterally pulling out of New START. On Crux Decode, what may be the implications of both of these decisions? If Moscow were to resume nuclear tests, will that push the envelope on the battlefield, forcing the West to either match Russia's escalation or coalesce the West into finding a ceasefire in Ukraine? Is Putin, by dangling the nuclear stick, also running the risk of turning Russia into a new North Korea? And is an attention-seeking exercise, how seriously should the world take Putin's nuclear threat? Putin, in his address to federal lawmakers last week, also said that the Sarmat silo-based intercontinental ballistic missiles would be deployed later this year. The RS-28 Sarmat, it's a liquid-fueled missile nicknamed Satan II. It was first announced by Putin in 2018. These missiles were supposed to have been deployed last year. And just around that same time, when Putin was making the speech, American media were reporting that the United States believes Russia carried out a test of the Sarmat just before US President Joe Biden visited Ukraine. And that visit coincided with the one-year anniversary of this war. The Russian Defense Ministry, though, dismissed those reports. The 35-meter missile has a range of 18,000 kilometers. It can carry up to at least 10 multiple targetable re-entry vehicles, each of them fitted with a nuclear warhead. And each of them can be aimed at a different target. It can also
Viewers, for days we've been building up to this moment. In a few hours, one of the most consequential election results will be announced. For the NDA, it is an opportunity to build on the momentum it had gained after a rather shock Lok Sabha result. The NDA, as the governing alliance, needs to project conviction, which comes from a sense of confidence that the public believes in its message and its leadership. A victory, therefore, in the second largest electoral battlefield and in the Hindi heartland will give the NDA added conviction to push through with some critical political and economic reforms that can spur Bharat on to greater things. The legislative agenda for the upcoming winter session, as you all know, is heavy and potentially transformative. But the result, to be honest, will hold the most consequence. And take it from me, viewers, in writing, for the India bloc. In Maharashtra, since the last 2 days, the MVA has begun to temper its expectations. The reason is an unexpected turnout twist that many pollsters and analysts feel had given the NDA an edge. The debate is now only about how much of an edge. Here are some numbers, viewers, and these numbers are astounding in themselves. More male voters have turned out by almost, viewers, 4%. That's a huge jump. Female voters, an even bigger jump, almost 6%, viewers. In Vidarbha, where the election